Hi, everybody. I am Jen Cox with the Suburban Newspaper, and we are here with our book blogger, Meredith. Hi, Mer.
Hello.
And we are also here with our book club pick author, Jean Meltzer. We have our book, Kissing Kosher, which we've been reading for the past few weeks. And it's always such a pleasure to have the author on with us. What a treat when we get to talk about the book, Meredith and I, but then we get to actually ask all the juicy questions to the author themselves. So thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me and for choosing my book. I could not be more excited to be here today to talk to you all.
Yay, awesome. All right, so we love this book, Meredith, like she said previously to just doing the recording, as soon as it was like, well, what's our fall pick? She's like, I know which book we're reading. We're going to do Kissing Kosher. So can you tell us a little bit about the background of the book and how you kind of came up with the different characters that you did and something like that?
Sure. So the book is about a man named Ethan Lipman, heir to a kosher baked goods empire, who is sent undercover by his iron-fisted grandfather in order to, at this artisanal kosher bakery in Brooklyn, in order to steal their world-famous recipe for pumpkin spice babka. And while there, he meets Avital Cohen, a woman suffering from chronic pelvic pain and sexual dysfunction, leaving both of them to wonder if they have the right recipe for falling in love. And honestly, I was inspired to write this book from my own journey. A lot of people do not know that when I was actually around the same time I found out that matzo ball, my first book, was getting published, I woke up, I'm going to be very blunt, with what I thought was a UTI, a urinary tract infection. And 8 rounds of antibiotics, 3 specialists later, I knew that what I was dealing with was not a simple UTI. And thus, I officially became a chronic pain patient, chronic pelvic pain patient, specifically. And I had an experience sort of like with my other disease, ME/CFS, that when I started talking about it, women would lean in and say, me too. And all the shame and sort of secrecy, again, around something we can't control, which is chronic illness. And so for me, it just became incredibly important to make my third book about this otherwise and usually taboo topic.
Well, that honestly, that is what drew me to the book and what had me hooked was, throughout this pandemic, my child is a high risk when it comes to COVID. So I've joined so many high risk groups and a lot of chronic illness sufferers, and they feel invisible.
Yes.
When I read this book, I was just like, oh my goodness, this is bringing visibility to the center stage.
Yes.
And I just wanted to tell all those groups, guys, read this book. You're going to be seen. You're going to feel seen. You're going to love it. But was there any pushback from the editors or the publishers about having the main character have chronic illness?
No, I feel like I'm one of the rare lucky authors that I go to my publisher with kind of these wild ideas, and they're like, yeah, okay, go for it. So I'm very lucky that they not just trust me, but they sort of lift me up to sort of tell the stories I want to tell. And I think it's for exactly that reason that it's often, these are, especially with chronic disability, these are often not stories that are told, or not told in a way that really talks about how it can affect your life in so many different ways and avenues. But we deserve, chronically ill and chronically disabled people deserve our own types of romantic fantasies, and we deserve our own types of happy endings. And so Kissing Kosher, much like matzo ball, is a book that is a chronic illness fantasy in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I love too that the focus wasn't let's try to find her a cure. It was let's try to figure out how she can learn to live happily with her chronic illness. I know for myself, everyone's trying to cure my son's allergies and asthma, and it's it doesn't work that way. So I loved that about this book. I had a hesitation at first. I'm like, oh, is this where it's gonna go? And I love that it didn't. It was so real.
Thank you. Yeah, for me, I don't live in a world where my chronic illnesses are cured, but I have found good and healthy love. I've been sick a very long time, since I was 18, 19 years old. And everyone I've sort of been on this journey with, other chronically ill women, I always tell people, are married in great relationships, are with partners. And if they're not, it has nothing to do with their chronic disability or chronic illness. We have a tendency in our culture to sort of undervalue disabled people, undervalue sick people. I still bring a lot to my relationships and this world. I still have value. And that's the message in my books. It's not about getting back to some quote unquote version of normal. It's learning to adapt with what you have and finding your tribe, finding your community that uplifts you on your bad days.
And you really brought us a prince in Ethan. The way that he just, okay, let's figure this out. What can we do? What can I do? How can I make it? He's making foods for her that she can eat. Oh,
I know.
love
I know. Well, if your son have allergies, you know this very well, that like, you know, food is such a communal experience, and not being able to eat, you know, especially with my IC, I have IC like Avatal. I've had to be on very limited diets at time. And so that idea, not just of food, but food becoming a language of love is it can be that way for chronically ill people too. So it just might have to look a little different.
And the scene where there's a mom who came to his stall, and he was like, I have allergy friendly stuff. And she was like, what? You know, it's like, I've lived that. I've found that bakery, and that's the bakery we go to every single week to make sure it stays in business. And I loved that it wasn't like, ooh, there's a market, we can make money in this. It was, there's a market because there's a need for this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's absolutely. So, and just like, it's interesting you say that, because just like the books that I write, there's a market because there's a need for this, right? There's a need for these types of stories. So, but yeah, and also again, like that idea that like the world is thinking about you and your needs, that the person who loves you is thinking about you and your needs. Isn't this the ultimate expression of healthy love and community?
I also wanted to ask, on the back of the books, there's the little blurb that when you started writing, your father said not to write Jewish novels. No one's going to read those.
Yeah.
It fucked me up. So going into I've read all your books now, but going into them, I'm like, oh, I don't really know much about Judaism, and am I going to feel lost and stuff? But I was telling Jen earlier that recently I was watching that new Adam Sandler movie, and I realized about halfway through that I was catching every single reference, and it was because of your books. So I'd like to know whether now.
Gosh, that's like the best compliment. I really appreciate that. Is awesome. You know,
really, and that's how it sticks, right? Through novels, through fictions, because you're experiencing things with these characters. So I want to know first pass that on.
Yes, but I definitely will. That's the coolest thing.
I just wanted to say, like, I'm happy you didn't listen to your dad.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, I think he was thinking more of like the nonfiction. Growing up, we had what was called the Jewish library in my home. So it's very typical for Jewish families, especially more religious families. You have your textbooks, you have the history books, you have, and I never really, even when I wrote Matzo Ball and sat down, there wasn't really even a conception that there would be like Jewish romance novels. There had been, but in like the traditional Jewish world, you know, I did not, growing up in my Jewish library, have a Jewish romance novel. So I don't even think my dad could like conceptualize when he made that statement of like Jewish books being fun and Jewish books being, you know, about Jews just living their lives and not being related to a war or the Holocaust or something like that. So, you know, but he was also incredibly funny, my dad. So that was very much my dad just giving his advice, and people were like, oh, and I was like, Dad, you're going on the back of the book, and he was like, oh.
I love
that. I'm glad you didn't
listen
to him. Yeah.
I have a quick question. I was just wondering too, like, what was the feedback from, you know, friends and family that read the book? Maybe they didn't realize what you were experiencing in your chronic pain. And do you feel like the book kind of helped shed some light? And they said, well, I didn't know that you were going through that, or you felt this way, if it was sort of a reflection of that at all?
So my family, thank God, has been very good with my chronic illness. I've also been really sick. So I've been homebound for about a decade. I was almost bedbound, basically, meaning I didn't leave my house for 2 years. And the most I would do was like a half-hour trip to the grocery store, like once every 2 months. So my family like knows I'm sick. They're very aware of I'm sick. But I did actually get some emails from people I had gone to school with and graduate school with who were like, we didn't understand, we didn't know, I didn't realize, I'm really sorry. And I was like, it's not really, I mean, this is part of the problem, you know, in MECFS, we call ourselves the millions missing, right? Because we're kind of like stuck in the houses and we're homebound and you don't see us. And I always say too, if I didn't have chronic disability, I would not understand chronic disability. There's something about living it and understanding that it's not linear, that you can be totally fine one day and horrible the next, that you never see it, right? I don't look sick, I don't present as ill. But there's something about reading it in a book that makes it real, right? And you can see that. So I think it's a very powerful thing. So I did get emails, and I've gotten emails from a lot of people who have given the books to their family and friends who are not understanding, who then came back and said, wow, now I get it. Now I understand why you're here for this and not for that.
Wow, how validating as a writer
Yeah.
to know that. Yeah, that's amazing.
That's why I always tell my kids reading is the best way to develop empathy, because you're stepping into somebody else's shoes.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's important for books to have representation in them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
sure.
also it's fun to see, you know, one of the things why I was so passionate about writing Jewish romance particularly was because you know, in my religion, it's hard to have access points. So for this is access points, not just for Jews, but for non-Jews as well. If you want to experience a Shabbat dinner, if you want to know what it's like to keep kosher, if you want to know what it's like to live in the Jewish community, this is just a little sneak peek into, you know, our lives. And I really hope people, just like any book out there, enjoy that.
I love that. So, okay, so my favorite question, just to wrap things up, I always want to know, what are we working on next?
So I am working on a book called Magical Meet Cute. It's coming out August 2024. And it is about a Jewish woman. So she's what we call a Jewish, so a Jewish witch. And she inadvertently, one night after an anti-Semitic incident in her town, she is a potter. She makes an effigy, a little stone clay effigy, buries it in her backyard as part of a ritual. And the next day, when a man shows up with everything that was sort of on her doll checklist of the perfect man, she begins to wonder if he's Mr. Right or if she inadvertently summoned a golem. So it's a Jewish and golem love story. And I'm super excited about that.
Wow, that is amazing. I wonder how many books fall into that category out there. I bet you there's not too many.
I don't know. But what's been really cool about it is, again, telling stories. Is I've spent a year doing a deep dive on sort of Jewish mysticism, magic, and the supernatural. And it's been very cool to see how Jewitches, or the idea of Jewish witchcraft, is like so different than mainstream ideas of witchcraft. So I'm really excited to share all that learning with people through this book. And I really hope you guys read it, because if you've ever wanted to see some 15th century divination rituals, this book will have it in them. So
I'm excited.
Sounds like a fun read for next year, Meredith, for our book club.
And as you're saying this, I'm watching a witch's hat blow down my street. So
awesome! Yay! It's
I can't wait.
Exactly. Definitely synchronicity.
I love it.
And also, every year I do a roundup of holiday rom-coms, and this year look out, because this one will be included, which was your second book, right? I love it. Yeah,
I know. I love Mr. Perfect on paper too. Always like, that book was so perfect written. It did everything I wanted it to do. And it's a beautiful way to look through the holidays all the way from Rosh Hashanah to Hanukkah.
I think it's a good way to kick off the holidays, is we start with that one.
Excellent. I love it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Jean, for joining us. Like I said, it's always a real added privilege when we get to discuss the book with the author themselves. So it was a really fun read, and we can't wait to see what's coming next.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for choosing my book and for both the holiday reads and for this book club. I am so grateful to be here, and happy reading.
Hey, happy reading. And everybody stay tuned because we will be announcing our next book club pick in the coming days. So make sure to stay tuned for that. So thank you everybody for joining us and have a great day.